Professora Laura, a gente percebeu aqui, pelo depoimento de pelo menos dois dos entrevistadores, que o casamento, na verdade, está em transformação e que você, na verdade, se concentra naquilo que é ainda considerado status quo, mas que não é o que se constata na realidade, pelo menos de algumas experiências. O que me parece é que o seu problema é com o casamento, com a ideia do casamento monogâmico, onde o amor se realiza eternamente e duradouramente. Hoje em dia não é muito mais fácil a gente se separar, não é muito mais fácil a gente buscar outros casamentos. Então minha questão nós não estamos já construindo uma solução. No início do programa eu tinha questionado qual é a saída. Quer dizer, essa saída já não está sendo construída, não é a liberalização da mulher. Você usa uma coisa interessante, que é a independência financeira da mulher, a liberalização da mulher. Na verdade, é uma igualdade de submissões. Mas nós não estamos já justamente rompendo essa igualdade de submissões. Hoje é muito mais fácil construir vidas alternativas.
I would like to think that that's true. You know, when you say that I'm not sure if I totally understood, but I think that you said that the social description in the book, or the social reality that I'm describing, doesn't exist, or it's in transition. You know, one of the things that's been interesting to me when the book has been translated into different contexts is that there seems to be this element of recognition. You know, I've written what seems to me to be an accurate, even though slightly exaggerated, picture of social reality. But if it didn't resonate with people, I think there wouldn't be a discussion, it wouldn't be read and talked about. So I think I understand that people are conflicted about this book, because I think that and I don't mean this in a self-congratulatory way, but that I have written something that people seem to acknowledge in a private way, but don't want to acknowledge in a public way. You know, we prefer to think that the situation is hopeful, that it's getting better, that it's not that bad, that there are these great things about being in a couple, you know, and all that's true, but there is some element that I think that I've described that people know to be true but don't want to admit. And I actually understand that. You know, we want to look for good news, and I'm describing kind of a grim situation. But, you know, the political mode of that, as you describe the grim situation, then it's up to everyone else to figure out a way to transcend it. So I feel like my job was to sort of, you know, blow up the bridge, to blow up the building, and then, but it's not my job to say, and this is how to rebuild it, you know. So I was the, you know, destruction, the demolition artist, and then somebody else could come along and build the better building.
Gioconda.
Pois é, Laura, você disse várias vezes que você é uma romântica, né? Então eu também sou. Agora, eu não sou ingênua, então eu não estou querendo respostas, mesmo porque, como diz o Gaiardo, o que a gente tem que fazer, e o trabalho de um intelectual é muito mais procurar perguntas do que respostas. Mas, como até pela minha idade, praticamente acho que é a mesma que a sua, a gente só pode ter amores maduros, não juvenis, porque já passou. Você fala tão mal do amor maduro, como se o amor maduro fosse uma coisa tão xoxa, que nem com um pão requentado, uma coisa velha. Quer dizer, então nesse sentido, não é que eu gostaria de uma resposta, mas não tem nenhum alento, nenhuma coisa boa para senhoras, jovens senhoras românticas, por exemplo. Mas estou perguntando, vai lá, não é? Porque o amor maduro, você coloca lá entre aspas, assim, uma coisa, mas de segunda linha, assim, pior que prêmio de consolação, um amor maduro. Quer dizer, aquela coisa com o chinelão, entendeu? Sem graça. Não é? Não tem alguma coisa...
Actually, the metaphor that I used, and this was, you know, I like, sometimes I would write things and it would make me laugh. So the metaphor I actually used was that it's like denture adhesive, you know, the thing that holds dentures.
Dentadura.
That it's supposed to hold things together, but it never quite works, you know. So when I was reading these advice books, second only to the phrase, you must work at your relationship, was the phrase, you know, romantic love fades, and then we have mature love. And I got so sick to death of hearing this phrase, mature love, that I really just did want to, you know, demolish it. So, you know, I know you've accused me of not being a realist or being naive. And, you know, like, The thought that came to mind, and forgive me, because this, I'm going to speak in a polemical mode. In the United States now, we hear a lot of discussion about whether torture should be used under certain circumstances. And to be a political realist now in the United States is to say that torture should be used in the post 9/11 situation. So this discussion of how to be a realist and what does it mean, can get applied to the most inhuman kinds of situations and circumstances. And I would like to think that humans could evolve better forms than to use torture when, in a politically realistic way. And I think the same thing about this whole dialogue and discourse about maturity. What's so great about it? I'm in favor of pleasure and fun and play. And instead, apparently, once you get married, it's hard work and maturity and, as I say, the early graveyard. So, there may be a way in which, if we're realists, we say, yes, you have to work at your marriage, but I would like to ask for something else, more fun, more play,
Mas
less torture.
Esse caminho do prazer e da alegria e da diversão, ele não quer dizer, em não sendo de alguma forma acordado, porque é bom que se diga que o seu livro aborda não apenas o casamento homem e mulher convencional, você coloca tudo no mesmo saco, sejam eles homossexuais, até mesmo não casados, adultério, é tudo relações humanas entre casais, nesse sentido mais amplo. Isso não é complicado de ter diversão, entretenimento e alegria e desejo liberado se a velocidade com que as pessoas, digamos, correm nessa pista pode ser diferente? Quer dizer, o que é diversão para hoje, para mim, pode não ser para minha parceira e vice-versa?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to legislate the idea of what fun is or dictate to somebody else what fun should be. And, this goes back to the question about adultery. And it's true that adultery itself can evolve into a little mini marriage with its own rules. I just was reading a paper that somebody sent me about, in the United States they call it polyamory, or couple swapping, couples meeting to swap and have sex with each other as a possible alternative or a way to have fun in the context of marriage. So you can not have emotional attachment, but you can have sexual
Não uma
attachment.
selva, mas um jardim zoológico, algo assim, né?
It was a bit zoo-like. And the thing that struck me in reading this paper was how many rules there were to this, polyamory, that it's a situation where in order to grapple with the fact that desire doesn't last, couples are evolving this play. In fact, they call them play couples. This is the phrase they use, play couples. But it's, again, more rules, and that is the interesting thing. And, it may be that this is a human dilemma, that desire, the free expression of desire is threatening to social institutions and structures. But this notion to have desire, which is supposedly free but is endlessly regulated, is a contradiction.
Professora, no finalzinho do livro, a senhora faz comentário sobre o título do livro, que se chama Contra o Amor, mas em inglês esse contra, que é o against, tem uma conotação que não é totalmente contra, ele pode ser no sentido também de próximo. Estaria aí a chave para se entender muita coisa que foi dita antes, quer dizer, não seria, como a senhora mesmo disse aqui, quer dizer, não seria um livro contra o amor, mas de certa maneira a favor do amor? Essa é uma chave para o livro, para se entender o livro?
I've been told that it doesn't translate the same way in Portuguese, that against has two meanings in English. And, I was faced with the question of how to end the book. If I wasn't going to solve the problem, how do you bring it to a conclusion? And when I realized that the word against had two meanings, it did seem to be a provisional solution or a provisional ending. But the other thing that I talk about at the ending is flirtation. That the possibility of being suspended between two possibilities, or having desire but not necessarily acting on it, or leaving the questions open. And that was in a way a literary discussion, but it was also in some ways a psychological one, the idea to have more openness. And I know I sound utopian and naive to say this, but it's also in response. It's a strategy to propose this, and it's in a way I'd have to acknowledge that to purport to be against working at your relationship. It's strategic to say that, to say, well, why do we have to work so much? So I do understand in our personal lives and in my own personal life, I might agree you have to work at your marriage, or that there's some value to maturity over being infantile. But, for the purposes of a polemic, to raise questions and to provide a critique, I thought I was allowed to do that. So to leave these possibilities open and to be have more levels in play seemed to be a useful thing to do.
Laura, o nosso tempo está acabando. Eu queria fazer uma última pergunta também, mais ou menos, que remete à primeira, partindo do princípio de uma frase do escritor argentino Ernesto Sábato, que é um pouco mais complicada do que eu vou falar aqui, que ele dizia que toda donzela tem dentro de si um dragão. Então, a pergunta é a seguinte: se você ainda continua esperando o príncipe encantado.
Of course. I mean, as we all know, to be in love, to be swept off your feet is an incredibly joyous experience. And, it may be that there's an element of narcissism involved in that too. I think one of the things that happens when you fall in love is you fall in love with yourself as well. Somebody else is gazing adoringly in your eyes, and you see yourself reflected in their eyes, and you fall in love with yourself. So there's an element of narcissism and gratification to that that's probably unparalleled by anything, except to have a lot of people talking about the book that you wrote, which was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Laura. Obrigado aos nossos entrevistadores, a você que está em casa, e nós estaremos de volta na próxima segunda-feira com mais um Roda Viva. Uma ótima semana e até segunda.